Welcome to Dialed In on the Virtual Care Journey with Jeremy and Becca, your trusted companions in navigating the ever-evolving landscape of virtual care.
Okay, episode 2, we are here. Thanks for joining us again, everyone, on Dialed In on the Virtual Care Journey. I'm Becca Bean.
I'm Jeremy Hedrick.
And we're still here.
We are still here. They brought us back for episode 2, whoever
Right.
they are.
You know what? You're still listening to us and you haven't fired us yet as a way to entertain yourself.
That's
or
right.
You're trying to at least recognize that, oh, I know these two. They're going to ask if I listened. And so they're
Right.
still listening, right? I have
That's
a feeling
right.
that's going to be my mom. Oh, I heard your podcast because you made me play it after you taught me what a podcast was.
Oh, good. I hope so. I'm ready for the critique from my boys.
Oh, it's going to be
on all
great.
the reasons I should be a better podcaster.
It's going to be great. And then they're going to have their own podcast.
And then I'll tell them to be better kids, and then we'll be even. So,
You know.
I'm just kidding.
Maybe that one is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
You have no favorite child. But I do think sometimes there are moments where DialCare tends to be the favorite child within our world.
Yeah, I mean, we laugh all the time. Like, nobody will actually admit they have a favorite child, right? So for us, amongst all of our Carrington companies, even within DialCare, right, we have, so just so we can level set, we have multiple kind of clinical silos that we're in. So we offer physician care, both primary care and urgent care. We offer mental health services, dental, virtual dental care, and virtual veterinary care, right? So we want to say we have no favorite product line. But on some days, it's one versus the other, right?
Which one's causing either headaches or which ones you get those great success stories? Our behavioral health program,
Right.
You always know when you've hit a chord and had a win and you get an email from a client or a parent. We work with a lot of students and just know that our therapists were able to make a breakthrough. Or with that one, we have a former employee who said, this is one of the hallmarks of my career, to be able to work on a program that's making a difference in kids' lives.
Absolutely.
So it's just a blessing and a great thing to be able to be a part of.
Agreed. So one thing I know that we talked about as we kind of looked back at episode 1 is probably just starting with just kind of a level set. I mean, our assumption is that most people that are going to find themselves listening to this are somewhat either in the industry or industry adjacent, or they know us or whatever, until it starts to whatever, ends up happening with future episodes and guests and those types of things. But there may be people that find themselves here like not really fully understanding terms they may hear in the industry or delivery systems or whatever. So just to boil down the absolute basics, right? So virtual care is just that. It's delivered primarily, one of 3 channels: phone, video chat, video conferencing, or messaging, text messaging,
Asynchronous care where...
And then there's the asynchronous versus synchronous question, right? So for those that don't know, asynchronous is kind of, I'm going to package everything up and I'm going to send it to a physician or a dentist to analyze. So let's put it in the dental world, right? We have a teledentistry program. So if we were going to perform that asynchronous, which all of our services are synchronous, meaning live. So asynchronous would be, I could package up digital x-rays, a treatment plan, and a questionnaire and send that to a dentist to review. But they may take several hours or a day to review that and then send back to me a message that either answers my questions or gives their thoughts or second opinion or however it's being used. So it's not happening in real time.
Right.
There's no real time exchange. Synchronous just simply means live, right? So I'm going to
Just
connect
like
in
this.
a phone just like this.
Except for put a screen there because we wouldn't be sitting in person if it was
That's right.
a virtual care.
That's right. So phone, video, and chat. We know there's a lot of chat platforms out there as well. So from that perspective, that's really kind of the basics, right? But for us, another piece of this that we wanted to dive into is not just kind of what the industry, basic terms, basic kind of functionality, but also for me, one of my big topics that I know I talk about in a lot of meetings when we're talking about this is the move away from just looking at virtual care as a convenience play.
Yep.
Versus a necessary part of the delivery of our healthcare across the country, right? And so for a long time, virtual health was just looked at as a convenience play. Well, I don't have time. I don't want to drive to an urgent care, whatever. That then opened a little bit more, would still be kind of somewhat convenience adjacent, but then you're talking about like rural areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at some of our states in the U.S., we operate in all 50 states plus, and then you look at some of our states, there's a ton of rural areas. They don't even have potential clinicians within a reasonable driving distance. Some
more than 100 miles. Like you're
quite
driving 2 hours. We had 2 hours or more in order to go in and see care, able to eliminate some of that drive time. Can you imagine being stuck in a car for 2 hours, like once a week for a checkup or a follow-up?
No. And especially when it can be handled virtually, right?
Right.
There are some things that need to be done in person. We're strong believers in that, obviously. But you eliminate some of that kind of inconvenience. But when you take it out of just the convenience play and more into just equity and of the delivery of care, right? Yeah. So not just the convenience of, now I don't have to drive 2 hours one way anymore. That's huge, right, in and of itself. But if you also look at it, in a lot of cases, these, whether it be rural areas or just specialty needs. I know at one point early on in our mental health program, we have a mental health program targeted at students called Dialogue, mm-hmm. right? So when I say targeted at students, really ages 11 to 18, right? So one of our first schools was down in way southern Texas in a town called Laredo. Big town, lots of clinicians, but one of the folks we were dealing with down there had a child with some pretty specific mental health needs, and that their child wasn't finding a good connection with anybody in their town. They were driving 2.5 hours one way 3 times a week to meet with a clinician that their child felt really comfortable with, right? When you start to think of it in terms of leveling the playing field to choice and being able to access people and have more access to people, especially in the mental health space, where I think it's so important to have somebody that you really feel connected with and trust. There's a huge element that to me goes way beyond convenience. We're now talking about
it's health equity.
It's health equity in terms for sure, but it's also giving that user, right, that patient, the ability to in whatever treatment they're getting in that virtual space, they're progressing in that faster, and quality of life is better, mm-hmm. and expenses are less, and you have all these different components to it.
I mean, outside of even things that we do, you can look at like a cancer patient who now just has to be able to do a virtual consult with their oncologist in between chemo appointments, mm-hmm. versus having to go in, be in an environment where they could collect more germs, get sicker. Now they're able to get some of those follow-up visits without ever having to leave their home when they're not feeling great to begin with. And that's not something that DialCare does, but there's so many different modalities that virtual care is playing a part in the whole healthcare infrastructure. And I think some of those specialties are still just scraping the surface on things that could be done.
Yeah. So on that, let's talk a little bit about what does DialCare do? Yeah. Let's just kind of set the stage for what DialCare does. And then we can kind of use that as a springboard into other things we've seen in the virtual health space that we think is cool, and things that are continuing to develop that other people may need to see. Obviously, we never know who will be watching this, so there may be people interested in finding care for themselves. There may be investors looking at what kind of stuff's out there, and obviously we won't be the only conduit for that for them, but talking about things that we see out there is pretty fun for us too.
So within DialCare, we have 4 main pillars of programs that we kind of run ourselves, and one of which is our virtual vet. I'm starting with our 4-legged friends, and I'm going to kind of work to the more complex ones. Virtual vet, very much a guidance line for pet parents to call to speak with veterinary professionals. Used it personally when my husky ate a baby bird when I was pregnant. That one was not so much fun. And I had that innate fear. Is it like a chicken bone that they eat where you have to rush them to the emergency vet? Answer is no. Baby birds do not have the same thing as a cooked bird bone. But I was panicked, pregnant, husband out of town.
Uplifting, everyone, isn't it?
I was like, sorry for anyone who is worried about the baby bird. I apparently have a dog that likes to terrorize all living things. She's a lovely husky that sings, especially on conference calls.
True statement.
But it is one where everyone has been seeing that bill from the emergency vet that you feel like you walk in the door and it's immediately $1,000 or $2,000, and having that ability to call before you go spend that money is kind of like that great peace of mind. Next big pillar, and Jeremy, I'll let you go a little bit more into detail on this just because you've got such roots in dental, and yes, roots. We like puns in our company. I know that one just came straight to my mind about our teledentistry program.
Yeah, teledentistry, our roots in our kind of affiliate company, Carrington, are very much in dental. That's been in our DNA from the beginning. And Becca alluded to this, I think, on a previous episode. Like when we launched DialCare, people's assumption was that we would launch a virtual dental care program. For a multitude of reasons, it didn't make sense for us to do that first. And at that time, these decisions were being made back in 2015, 2016. But fast forward to September of 2020 is when we did launch. It was not a pandemic play. This was well into development prior to the pandemic, but that's just when it became ready. So our teledentistry program, first question I'm asked a lot in the industry, because I'm still really heavily involved in the dental benefits industry as a whole through trade associations and these types of things, is really what can you do virtually with dental, right? Great question. And there's a lot that obviously you can't do. It's a very hands-on profession. But when you start to take a step back and think of it in terms of maybe a couple of different swim lanes to look at it in, one is second opinion. It's phenomenal for that. Oral health care can be expensive, it can be confusing, it can be just wrought with questions that you may or may not think of in the moment with your dentist. And because of that, then you get home and you are, I wonder what this means. What is this going to do? Is this going to hurt as bad as it sounds? Whatever. You can Google all that. That's fine.
We already found out, though, Google leads to death in
Google
episode
means you're
1. Yeah.
Lose all your teeth. And it's no offense to Google. I don't want to get sued by anybody on that side. It's not their fault. But at the end of it all, talking to a live clinician is huge, right? So they can walk you through, here's what this treatment plan means, here's what you should expect, those types of things, right? So it's an impartial second opinion. There's no financial incentive for them to agree, disagree, tell you should be charged more or less. Like none of that really exists. It's just a really strong clinical advice, right, in a live setting. Then there's what I generally just talk about is moving people into treatment faster, right? For anybody that's had a filling, it's uncomfortable potentially, but it's not the worst thing. If anybody's had a root canal, you realize that you would probably rather have a filling, right, than a root canal. And so there's varying degrees of treatment options that progressively get worse and therefore more invasive and more painful and potentially more side effects or time away from work and these types of things. So for people that may be hesitant to go sit in the chair and get the dental work done, there's a way that you can talk to somebody and say, what does this mean? What happens if I don't get this cavity filled or whatever? Then there's the urgent care bucket, right? I don't know the exact stats. There's different reports and studies out there, but generally speaking, the vast majority of emergency room visits for oral health issues are not needed to be in the ER, right? They could have waited till tomorrow. In some cases, they could have waited quite some time, but we don't know that. We're confused when it comes to our oral health sometimes. And then there's the one that excites me probably the most, which is let's combine some other elements. Let's do an oral health assessment, potentially leads to maybe oral cancer screening, right? And then a score on your oral health and a discussion around why you might want to get certain things treated. So when you start to combine all of that, there's a ton of opportunity, I think, for virtual care and dental to continue to expand. And obviously DialCare is leaning into that heavily, but I know there's other players out there as well. And it's an industry that once people really understand all that can be accomplished through that, it's really kind of a win for everybody.
Yeah, though it's still the one that I think people scratch their heads at the most when we talk about our programs.
It is. We get the most questions about that one, for sure.
What can they actually see when you take a picture of your teeth? It's like, and most dentists can go, I triage patients over the phone on a regular basis. But I think less people have a dentist in their family or in their friend group compared to even a doctor or a nurse that they could call for health-related questions. So
mental health is
kind of our next pillar. That one's really broken into 3 buckets. So therapy, psychiatry, and dialogue. Psychiatry is exactly kind of what you would picture. So virtual care for more major mental health issues. Still, we don't prescribe any controlled substances as any of the DialCare programs. So we're not going to be kind of that solution for someone looking for that. But we do know that there is a time and a place for medication to get involved within someone's mental health journey, and the psychiatrists have the ability to do that. So that's with an appointment set, and you're able to get connected with your psychiatrist. Kind of the pillar, though, of our mental health programs and what we launched with first is our therapy program, which is also similar to our dialogue program. It just depends on who your audience is. So with our therapy program, people can come in and schedule sessions with a counselor. They can go look through all the counselors' profiles in their states, figure out who would be the right fit for them, schedule a session, schedule repeat sessions with that person. We do screenings on the front end to assess kind of the overall mental health of the person coming in. And we've also taken that therapy program and pivoted it to the school market to where we can offer a program to 6th grade and above, 11 and older, really where the student is the primary patient record holder. We take care of getting parental consent when needed across all the different states and all the different rules, regulations for when consent is needed for a minor varies in every state. I think they're all different, which our IT team love to program, and our compliance team stays on top of making sure we're watching any of the policy changes that are taking place in state government to make sure we still know when to get consent on file. But we get that, and then I'd actually say the vast majority of parents are sometimes reaching out before the students saying, my kids need this. What do I need to do to get them signed up and into the program? And this is the one that I think our team is just ultimately passionate about. There's no shortage of knowledge about the mental health needs across the youth. Even if 19.86% of adults are experiencing mental illness, but you always hear the press is more around the minors and what's happening with all these school-age children that had to deal with living and working, doing school at home, not being around their peer groups, switching. Gosh knows social media has a time and a place, but it's not, in my opinion, for some of the younger brains, the molding minds, and the type of bullying and things those kids are being faced with are things I never had to deal with, right? You went home from school, you were done unless someone called you, and you were lucky if your parents got you a second landline. You're going to think even that's kind of
for
an
those
upgrade.
Of you who don't know what a landline is.
Yes, for those of you that don't know what a landline is, my kids, I have a 4 and a 5-year-old. They asked me what type of cell phone I had and where are my pictures of me as a baby on grandma's cell phone. And I had to explain that, that type of cell phone did not exist when I was a kid. And still the concept of what a phone was with a cord blew their mind, and they're like, couldn't grasp it. But now you have kids that have friends sending them good things and bad things at all times of night and day on their phone, and their brains just aren't at a place where they can process it, or they want to validate, is my feelings normal? Like getting them the opportunity to speak to someone, especially we work with a lot of small town districts where the only counselor that potentially is available is the one that sits next to them in the church pew on Sunday. And that's not necessarily who they want to be pouring their heart and soul out to, knowing that same person is in a knitting club, probably knitting club, book club, whatever, with mom. And it's just going to be something, they don't want that fear of their inner soul being talked about. Yeah,
this is an interesting concept. And maybe we'll dive into this in really great detail later in a different episode. But when you look at, especially let's talk about our dialogue program or even our university program. So let's just, from 11 to like 25, let's just kind of use a broad age range. So a couple of things are at play, right? For those that may have reservations about accessing mental health for whatever reason, it could be stigma, could be what I call the worry of running into them in the wild. Like I'm gonna tell you all of my worries and anxieties and stresses and mental health struggles, and then I see you in the grocery store. That's potentially for some really an uncomfortable moment. For those clinicians, it's not, right? This isn't a clinician issue. This is the fear of that's going to be awkward, or I'm not going to be as honest, as fast. When you look at all of the benefits, so whether it's stigma, okay, well now they can access care. They're not. I know for me, one of the hang-ups for one of my kids who at a young-ish age we knew would benefit from talking to a counselor, and he did that, and he's a huge advocate for mental health now. It's an incredible story for him, and yet one of his hang-ups early on was, I don't want anybody to see mom or dad's car parked out in front of the office, right? Which for us, there's only so much you can try to convince them. Nobody's gonna care. They'll drive right by it, not see it, whatever. But for him, it was a big issue, right?
Yeah.
And so when you then finally get him there, and he didn't care anymore at that point. But fast forward to when we launched Dialogue, I remember having a discussion with him. He was a little older at this point, and I said, hey, if you could have connected with your counselor via something like FaceTime or video chat, right? Would you have done so? I would have done it immediately, because nobody would have known, right? So whether it's the stigma piece, there's the convenience piece, the professional piece, the best counselor for me may actually live thousands of miles away, but now you can do it, right? Now you can access it, which is huge, right? But what we also should consider is that this is like a completely digitally native generation. They live with their phones. They know no other existence, right? So to then access care on the same way they communicate with everyone else in their lives, it's just natural, right? They're not thinking about, I shouldn't do that, right? We also have some pieces of business where our average age in that demographic of users, like 65, 70, 75 years old, right? So we had concerns early on, maybe not concerns, just questions like, what's the utilization going to be of a population that old?
When we all high-fived when someone that was in their mid-90s used our telehealth services. We're like, they self-service, can we call and
on the
see
app, by the way. They did the whole thing self-service.
They did it on their own, and yes, they did. We were so excited.
Yep.
But
and in the mental health space specifically right now, and one thing too is just hours of availability, right? So like our urgent care program for physicians 24/7, our mental health program 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. in all U.S. time zones, 7 days a week. The vast majority of our consults happening out of normal business hours, right? 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So that sometimes people will say, well, that's a convenience play. That's a quality of life play, right? Now they're not missing school or work or whatever, to take time away, drive to wherever they need to drive, wait in the waiting room, have the consult, drive back, and potentially in a worker mentality, having to take PTO to go do that or whatever. Now they can schedule that after dinner at 8 o'clock at night and still get the same level of care they would have gotten in the middle of it. So, from those perspectives, there's so much to it that just goes, really deep. And some of these early-ish kind of studies and things that are going on, statistics that are starting to come out, is how, especially in mental health, I know we've talked about this with our student program, we'll get feedback quite often from our clinicians. Students are honest so much faster virtually than when I'm sitting face-to-face with them. There's just this ability to be more free and more open to just, hey, Becca, here's what I'm struggling with, just from the jump with the clinician, where if they're sitting face-to-face, they think, I don't know if I trust this person. I'm reading body language. They look down when I said X about myself. It usually doesn't mean what they interpret it to mean, but now, because they're so much more comfortable in the setting, they're just getting to it
and
faster,
the clinician can see more in the setting. That gives them nonverbal, non-human clues of what's going on in that person's life. If they're having to take a consult in their car on a Sunday afternoon, that's way different than if they're able to take it in their bedroom on a Sunday afternoon. There's going to be a question around that, like, what are you doing that's out and about? Or in their bedroom, they've got a bunch of posters on their wall that may have insight into how to get the person to open up a little bit faster. Just gives them kind of those clues of how to build that connection. You started talking a little bit about our last program, kind of that fourth pillar, a little bit. So physician access, that's kind of, we joke it's the core, right? It's what got us into the telehealth space, and it's what I think a lot of people equate when they think telehealth is that urgent care program. We have two. We've got urgent care, and then we've got virtual primary care. Urgent care, always joke, is the sniffles business, right? It's you really don't want to have to get out of bed because you're not feeling well. You don't feel well, and you need to call a doctor and get seen quickly because you want to get on antibiotics sooner. Now, granted, we actually watch to make sure our doctors are not prescribing at 100%. There would be something wrong if the doctor prescribed on every single consult that came in. So we've got lots of quality checks on the back end to ensure the right protocols are being met. But so we take care of kind of that urgent care. Do I have a rash? New moms, my kid's losing their mind. A lot of the times it's normal. One of our coworkers and one of my good friends has a new baby, and I finally had to be like, all of this is normal. Like the little bit of crying is fine. I go, if she gets a fever, call someone.
Right.
Crying and screaming her brains off, I hate to say that's just being
Welcome
a
to
baby.
parenthood.
Yeah, that's just being a baby. So, but it's sometimes good having a medical professional share that with you versus even just another mom being like, oh no, you're fine. Well, you're going to sit there and go, well, just because you thought it was fine doesn't mean I thought it fine. Oh, a doctor tells me it's fine. A nurse tells me it's fine. Completely different scenario.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, kids just get sick, right? Like all the
and
time.
They get the rest
that's
of the
that's one of my
family sick.
common texts him. It's like, another one went down. I'm going to be working from home, and here's what's going on. And everyone's been in that situation. And so I'm a big proponent of the convenience of being able to get seen when appropriate, right? You have kids that if you're too little, guess what? Doctors need to look in little kids' ears. That's still
you know what? And that's an interesting whole nother side channel to everything we've talked about. So for all of the ways that we can access virtually, what that's also conversely doing is freeing up more face-to-face time in all of these clinicians' offices, potentially, right? So let's clear up that space, and depending on market and what clinical delivery we're talking about, there's just shortages, right?
Yeah.
Huge wait times, and so as you potentially put those into different streams that can sometimes coexist, right, and help access become even better than just the virtual side of it. So
I think we've kind of talked a lot dialed in on the virtual care journey today about kind of who we are, the programs, but telehealth is just in virtual care such an amazing field and something that just has so much potential and areas to explore. So really looking forward to more wow. If I could talk, that would be really helpful on a podcast.
You're doing great.
Right. So looking forward to having more conversations around telehealth and virtual care and the programs that exist, not only that we offer, but that others offer. And we're looking to have some guests brought in on future podcasts to really dive into some of the products and services that they offer as well. Yeah. So,
and I think in those, just so people can kind of look forward to what we'll eventually be bringing in, it's not to try to do a sales pitch or here's why you should use this. What they will focus on us too is much more the results that are coming out of what they're doing and how it's changing lives on a as level playing field as we can hopefully get to. And yes, there's still technology barriers that need to be solved in rural areas around broadband and those types of things. But what's great about this industry, and maybe at some point we'll unpack this too, is everyone has those similar challenges regardless of what maybe delivery they're in, and everyone's working together to try to solve those things, whether that's broadband access or whatever that hurdle might be, technology, actual physical device challenges that need to be in place. And so there's a lot of teamwork happening to solve those things, which I think then just continues to move people into just a more wide array of treatment options for whatever it is that they're needing care for, and it's in such an equitable way that it'll just continue to refine. And so when we bring folks on and talk about other things, we'll really talk about the outcomes of those things so that people can see what's really happening out there, and that could be pretty cool.
Is this where I raise my hand and you raise yours and say we are not medical professionals? Don't ask us for medical
that's probably
advice.
a disclaimer we need to put in writing somewhere.
Do not ever think that we're going to give you therapy or prescriptions. Like we're the business people, entrepreneurial minded. Right. We're not the doctors. Right. We love them. We work with them. We respect everything that they're doing, and they are kind of the backbone of our programs. But don't ask us for advice. Yes. That should always be a disclaimer on our shows. But so you can continue to listen to this podcast anywhere that you get your podcast. I'm going to butcher them again, but I think it is Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I think I'm getting better at memorizing those types of things at the end. So
pretty good.
Looking forward to the conversations continued, and we'll chat with more of you guys later.
Yep.